After 10 years of marriage, Thomas met his true love. He wanted to pursue a young girl as a single man. I smoothed out the wrinkles in my loungewear and nodded. As he was leaving, he turned back and asked, "Luciana, you've been a full-time housewife for so many years. Aren't you scared of getting divorced?" "No, I'm not. Becoming a full-time homemaker was my own choice. And this ending, I saw it coming. I've been prepared. That young girl he's after is the 20-year-old version of me." Chapter 1. The morning was as hectic as always. After checking my son Leo's outfit and sheet music for his piano competition, I hurriedly handed him off to the nanny. I turned around. Thomas walked out of the room, fastening his suit jacket with one hand. His eyes fell on me, distant and indifferent. I thought he'd say what he usually did, "Do you really have to run around in pajamas like the nanny?" But he didn't. Instead, he said, "Luciana, let's get a divorce." I stopped smoothing my clothes and looked at him. I've fallen in love with someone else. In that moment, his cold eyes softened more than the morning light, and his tone fell gently. "Like feathers, her name is Lucia. She's a new intern at my company. She's radiant and proud. Her eyes shine brighter than the stars." His words faded into silence, replaced by disappointment when he looked at me. Funny, he used to say it was my starry eyes that made him fall in love at first sight. But now, I'm older, faded. Thomas lowered his voice. "I know this is hard for you, Luciana. We built everything from nothing. You've been a full-time mom for years. You've even battled a serious illness. Think of Leo, he's only 9. He knew everything that made this hard, yet still insisted on the divorce." I asked, "Does that girl even want to be with you?" His expression lit up with the joy of someone who'd just found a rare treasure. "She's only 20, so pure, so full of life. I want to pursue her as a single man." But when his eyes returned to me, they filled with the same disgust as if he were looking at a dead fish. "Luciana, there's no love left between us. Let me go." He still has the more than 20 steel pins he used to save me, yet he wants me to set him free. The early summer sunlight cast shadows across his sharp, handsome face. The gray dress shirt he wore, I had ironed it that very morning. The platinum watch resting tastefully on his wrist, I had just had it serviced yesterday. He looked flawless and heartless. I nodded calmly. "Fine, I'll move into the Riverside apartment today." He exhaled in relief, then handed me his jacket, flashing a gentle smile. "One of the cufflinks is missing. Help me find a matching one." So naturally, he ordered around the wife he just abandoned for a younger girl. Ironically, that girl was the 20-year-old me. Chapter 2. She time-traveled from 15 years ago, yet no one ever thought we looked alike. I gave her a new name, Lucia, and arranged for her to become an intern at Thomas's company. And now, Thomas wanted a divorce because of her. Just as expected, packing didn't take long. After falling seriously ill 5 years ago, I had started selling off all my luxury handbags and clothes after short use. When I wheeled my suitcase into the living room, the faint scent of mugwort still lingered in the air. The rainy season was about to hit City A. I had just stocked up on heat packs. The steel pins in Thomas's body always ached on rainy days, like maggots burrowing into his bones. I tossed all the heat packs into the trash. Just then, Leo came home from his competition. He was dressed in a tiny suit, looking solemn and composed. In his hand was a small trophy for first place. He stood there silently, staring at me. He'd always been like this, quiet and reserved. Especially when things got tense between me and Thomas. It was as if he vanished. As I passed him, I gently patted the top of his head. "Leo, congratulations." Just as I closed the door, a muffled voice called out behind me, "Happy birthday, Mom." The hallway was silent. A soft night breeze floated through. Only he remembered. Tears poured down, rolling from the tip of my chin. Thomas had deliberately chosen my birthday as the day we registered our marriage. "Luciana, every year we can celebrate together on this day. Even if I lose my memory one day, I'll still remember this date. Today is my birthday. It's also our 10th wedding anniversary." Thomas forgot and chose this day to ask for a divorce. He forgot that he once loved me so fiercely. He'd risk his life for it. Chapter 3. I'm an only child from the city. Thomas came from a small town and clawed his way up in the big city. We were college classmates, but barely interacted. It was just that whenever I went to the library, He always saved me a seat, and whenever I went to pick up a package, I'd run into him carrying back everyone's deliveries to our dorm. Even when I looked up without thinking, I'd always catch him hastily looking away. I kind of liked him, but just a little, because I was preparing to study abroad. In the summer of our sophomore year, I got accepted into a 2+2 exchange program to the US. Thomas came with a group of my friends to see me off at the airport. We laughed and joked the whole way there. Thomas stayed quiet, occasionally glancing out the window, wiping the corners of his eyes. The shifting light in the tunnel carved out the angles of his face, highlighting the glimmer in his eyes. That's when I realized he wasn't just handsome, he was fragile and aching inside. And just as the crash hit with full force, the car went flying. In that split second of terror, Thomas had already thrown himself in front of me. He wrapped me tightly in his arms. I could feel his heart pounding like it was about to explode. Boom! Love roared through my mind, rolling with the car's violent tumble and the deafening crash inside the tunnel. There was ringing in my ears, pain, dizziness. Blood red blurred my vision. My whole body was soaked in Thomas's hot blood. He slowly reached out. His thumb, sticky and drenched, wiped the tear mole at the corner of my eye. His voice was thin and threadbare. Luciana, when you go abroad, will you write me letters? His hand fell limp. He passed out. In that moment, my tears mixed with blood and poured down uncontrollably. There was actually someone in this world who loved me so much. He'd die for it. It turned out love could outweigh the future. Love could outshine life and death. Love was law. Love was God. But reality is, when mortals are placed on a pedestal by love, they always come crashing down. Down in the lobby, Lucia stood there in a plain white t-shirt and jeans. Her eyes sparkled black and bright. Her fair face radiated youth and vitality. She grabbed my arm anxiously. Are you really going to divorce Thomas? We're the same person. Isn't it only natural he'd fall for me? Chapter 4. I lifted my gaze to her, calm and unshaken. Her eyes sparkled so brightly. The corners of her mouth curled in stubborn defiance, and her posture was perfectly straight. Her whole being radiated the pride and conviction of a young girl who believes she can conquer the world. And yet me, with the same face, dressed in a luxurious silk dress, body well maintained through years of discipline, carried nothing but the weight of decay. Even the mole at the corner of our eye, in the exact same spot, hers bloomed like a rose, mine dulled like dust. Between us stretched 15 years of life. We were no longer the same. I gave a bitter smile. In his eyes, we're not the same person. Luciana, this is cheating. He's committing infidelity. I said plainly. She grabbed my clothes, frowning and shaking her head, her voice firm. Thomas risked his life for me. He loves my soul. Luciana, she came through the time rift, soaked in blood, straight from that car crash. When she realized she had traveled 15 years into the future, realized Thomas was still alive, that she was married to him, she collapsed to her knees and cried out loud. Wah! Thank God he's alive. Thank God. I was so scared he'd die because he saved me. So I understood why she was clinging so tightly. Back then, after we survived that crash, our love ignited at a temperature of millions of degrees, burning fast and bright. I gave up going abroad to help Thomas recover, and my parents were furious. After graduation, Thomas and I moved to City A for work, and my parents cut me off completely. We went through hell in the city. All the pride and fire I once had were slowly worn away by the grind of daily survival. But I still remember, June of my 25th year was filled with joy. We registered our marriage, moved into our new home, and found out I was pregnant. Everything felt so full of hope. But when happiness reaches its peak, it plummets. Love that once burned like wildfire was now nothing but ashes. Chapter 5. The next day, I went to Thomas's company. He glanced at me briefly, then went back to reading his files, a smug satisfaction written all over his face, just as he had expected. While signing a thick stack of documents, he spoke casually. I'm not going to change my mind about the divorce. I slid the divorce agreement in front of him and smiled calmly. I was worried you'd be too busy. His hand paused mid-motion. He finally looked up and met my gaze. Luciana, you've been a full-time housewife for so many years. Aren't you afraid of getting divorced? Did he think I'd beg him to stay? I'm not afraid. The day I chose to be a full-time homemaker, I already knew this was a possible ending. Thomas lazily picked up the divorce papers, flipping through them, his index finger tapping repeatedly. I was asking for $5 million in cash, and 2 of the 3 properties we owned. His finger froze. He asked, "You're not asking for custody of Leo?" I let out a soft laugh. A full-time housewife like me couldn't afford to raise him. "Well, since you're being so reasonable." He closed the document and folded his hands like he was sitting at a business negotiation. "Don't you think you're asking for too much? I earned all of this," I said. "You know this amount means little to you, but to me, it's enough." Thomas replied coldly, putting a price tag on me. "Luciana, you're not worth that much. If we calculate it by the domestic labor market, you're worth about $1 million. And the Lotus Garden apartment, that's the most you should get." Lucia probably never imagined that the same Thomas who once risked his life for her would now appraise me like house help. He leaned on his hand, fingers against his cheek, his sharp gaze locked on mine. "I worked hard to support this family, paid for your medical treatment without hesitation. I never cheated. I've done nothing wrong. Legally, I owe you nothing more than this." He's right, Thomas never cheated. No matter how successful or smug he became, he never strayed. He made money. He stayed faithful. And for that, everyone expected me to be endlessly grateful. Even now, in falling for Lucia, he waited until after proposing divorce before pursuing her. Even my best friend Laura would call that honorable. I gave a cold laugh. "Thomas, if we end up in court, the public will see Lucia as the other woman." Thomas's eyes turned vicious and sharp, glaring at me. "Lucia is only 20, so innocent. Why are you bullying her?" That look in his eyes, it was the same as when he once saw me being harassed and looked like he wanted to kill the guy. I asked, "You stayed faithful all these years. Why fall in love with her?" He looked at me, open and direct. "Luciana, I've been through so much with you. That's why I'm not interested in anyone else." Then his gaze softened. "But Lucia's youthful vitality pulls me in. It's instinctive, like a gray life suddenly filled with color." How absurd. He truly fell in love with the 20-year-old me. But I'm the Luciana who walked through 15 years of storms with him, who bore his child, shared his life, and now, he chooses not to see me. My throat ached from the bitterness rising in it. Chapter 6. I calmly pulled out a stack of documents. "Thomas, even if we go to court, I might not lose." They were records of all the assets he tried to hide during our marriage. His $1 million stock options in the company, his financial contributions to his parents' luxury Riverview penthouse, the investments he made in his friends' businesses. All data I had collected carefully over the years. Each line, each column, were numbers etched with my pain and resentment. Thomas finished reading, and there was both surprise and a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. "Luciana, I thought you'd gone a bit soft after becoming a housewife. I didn't expect you to be so shrewd and calculating." I leaned back in my chair, the bitter smile on my lips turning into a light scoff. "Thanks for the compliment. Men know how to eat women alive, by using the mask of morality to make women give up what they're rightfully entitled to. I need money. I want a better life. What's wrong with that?" Chapter 7. When I returned to the apartment, Lucia happened to be on the phone with Thomas. "Lucia, I'm officially single now." His voice was cheerful and light, just like when I once agreed to move to City A with him. "My ex-wife doesn't want the kid. She asked for a lot of money and demanded we sign the divorce papers." With one sentence, he reduced me to a gold digger who abandoned her child for money. "Lucia, once the divorce agreement is finalized, I want to pursue you properly." Lucia blushed in a panic and quickly hung up the phone. Of course, now, he's rich, stylish, and undeniably attractive. After ending the call, Lucia sat cross-legged on the French wool carpet, her eyes wide and clear like a young girl's. She tilted her head and asked, "You can't accept that Thomas fell in love with the 20-year-old you, but how can you give up your child?" I said, "At the moment, I honestly can't afford his expensive piano and tennis lessons." She crossed her arms, frustrated with me. "I've been meaning to ask, why did you become a full-time housewife?" My GPA was a perfect 4.0. How could I possibly become a stay-at-home mom? My dream has always been to become a world-class marketing strategist. World-class marketing. I froze for a moment, then suddenly let out a soft laugh. Life has been so exhausting that I had completely forgotten the dreams I once carried down this road. A sourness welled up in my nose as I smiled. So what would you do? Work. Obviously. Balance career and motherhood. What if your mother-in-law isn't much help? Then I'd hire a nanny. Even so, you'd still need to take time off constantly for the family. The pressure at work would be intense. Her brow furrowed deeply. I'd work overtime and push myself to do an excellent job. I gently tapped her forehead with my index finger and smiled. And then what? Become a modern, independent woman who makes money, raises kids, and manages the household? I paused. Or will you end up an outwardly independent, inwardly exhausted human blood bank who exists just to support a man? Lucia's bright eyes were filled with disbelief. Luciana, listen to me, men absolutely love that kind of half-baked feminism. Money, kids, sex, home, they get all the benefits. I gently touched the corner of her eye. And in the end, all you'll get is a cancer diagnosis. Lucia was stunned. This went against everything she had ever been taught about the so-called strong modern woman narrative. She fell silent for a moment, then cautiously asked, "What about Thomas? Wouldn't he care?" The floor-to-ceiling windows were misted over with tiny raindrops. The air was thick with humidity, clinging to the skin. The June rainy season had arrived. Thomas's legs must be aching again. She asked again. He was always so good to me. Would he really let me suffer? For a long moment, scalding tears burned the back of my hand. Chapter 8. Thomas had always been good to me. After we moved to Cydia together, he handed over every cent he earned. He told me, "Luciana, I won't let you down." So I willingly invested more time into the family and raising our child, so he could soar higher. When did he stop being good to me? The days blurred together in dim grays. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was after he received his first 500,000 yuan project bonus, and then missed every single family day after that. Maybe it was when he saw the deep red and purple stretch marks on my postpartum body, flinched in fear, and threw himself into non-stop overtime. Maybe it was when I was driven to hysterics by his mother, or when I collapsed crying over my never-fading stretch marks, and he just stood there, cool and composed, asking, "Luciana, what's happened to you?" Or maybe it was when he got promoted to director and I cried over my failed raise, only to see disdain and arrogance in his eyes. Or the night his company went public and he stole the show at the celebration banquet, while I was crammed into a plastic chair at the ER, holding our feverish son as he got in 4 drip all night long. I hadn't laughed loudly in ages, hadn't read a single difficult book, hadn't been to the opera, hadn't traveled. I simply became fertilizer for the small patch of earth called family. But everyone said my marriage was blissful. High school sweetheart, hardship turned to reward, a handsome, wealthy, and faithful husband, so I believed it too. Looking back now, I was just afraid to admit all my effort had been in vain. Afraid to admit I was wrong. It wasn't until our 5th year of marriage that my stomach problems started. I didn't understand. I had regular routines, healthy eating habits, no bad lifestyle. The doctor thought for a moment and said, "The stomach is often where emotions go." The hospital hallway was lit with harsh white light, rain pounding against the windows like it would never stop. Then came the HR message. "Luciana, sorry, you didn't pass the promotion round. We'll have to reassign your role." Reassignment was just a polite way of saying you're fired. 8 years of diligent work, abandoned by the company in just 1 year because of my health. The medical report in my hand, and the blurry letters, CA, kept stabbing my eyes over and over again. I was only 30, but both my health and my career had already abandoned me. My vision blurred, merging with the rainy world outside. Then I saw him, standing tall and straight. Thomas had arrived. "It's okay. I still have my husband." Stumbling, I tried to reach out and embrace him. "It's just early stage, right?" He said calmly. "It's treatable. Why cry like this?" Cold, composed, not a trace of concern or empathy. He glanced at the message on my phone and sighed. That job, was it really that important? His tone, light and dismissive, lashed like a snake. "Luciana, how could you let yourself fall apart like this?" In that instant, I pulled my hand back. I didn't dare look at this stranger who was once my Thomas. I turned woodenly, staring out the window. Beyond the rain-streaked glass, Thomas stood there, successful, strong, confident, and me, desperate, frail, empty. What I thought was mutual devotion was nothing more than a one-way transfusion. He once said it was my job that eased his fear of layoffs, that it was my hard work at home that gave him the freedom to go all in at work. Now that he was thriving, my job and my early-stage cancer weren't even worth mentioning. He said, "How could you let yourself fall apart like this?" But who? Who gave love such grand, blinding light only to let it swallow my entire life? Love was just a beautiful lie. Chapter 9. Love may be an illusion, but life has to go on. I cooperated actively with the medical tests, treatment planning, and recovery schedule. I saw that Thomas chose the best for my surgery. Medication, hospital room, and follow-up treatment. There was a bitter kind of relief in that. Even without love, I thought this marriage, built on years of shared life, might still have some decency left. But again, I was wrong. A man without love has almost no conscience left. The day before the surgery, my in-laws came for dinner. I pretended everything was fine, smiling and cheerful as I welcomed them. Thomas didn't tell them about my diagnosis. He just said I'd be away on a business trip for half a month. They're old, they overthink, and the doctor said it's very treatable. No need to worry them unnecessarily, he explained. During dinner, my father-in-law announced they had bought a luxury Riverview apartment. I didn't want to know how they could afford such an expensive property. All I felt was a twisting pain in my gut, so intense, I couldn't lift my chopsticks. Meanwhile, they were having a great time. I had to retreat to the balcony to catch my breath. The sky was dark, ink-washed. Neon lights flickered among the high-rises. Laughter floated from the dining room. That's how strange the world is. Under the same roof, I felt oceans and mountains apart from them. They were cheerful and warm. I was writhing in pain. The universe loves to strike people down in an instant. At that very moment, I noticed Thomas had left his phone on the balcony, unlocked. I paid for most of that apartment. We'll put it under your and Dad's names, just in case I run into a big property dispute with Luciana or her parents later. Another message listed the stock options and annual salary the company awarded him this year. It was more than 3 times what I'd ever known. Early June, but I felt like I'd been plunged into an ice cellar. I was freezing, so cold I started to shake uncontrollably. This was the same Thomas who once risked his life for me, now calculatingly insulating assets the moment I was diagnosed with early-stage cancer. Afraid his wife might claim her share, afraid her death might benefit her parents. So he gave me the best treatment, not out of conscience, but out of guilt. Love isn't just an illusion, it's a goddamn joke. Every burst of laughter from inside the apartment cut into my chest like a knife. My abdomen felt like it was bursting, overflowing with blood, hot, viscous, boiling. Love had chewed me up and spat me out. The city shimmered in neon, dazzling to the extreme. What they call a happy and perfect marriage was just a soap bubble. My feet stood firm on the ground, but all of me was falling, crumbling into the dirt. But it's okay. Even if the old Luciana dies, I'll live again. Chapter 10. A warm body wrapped around mine. It was Lucia. Her eyes were red as she held me, her voice trembling. It must have hurt a lot, the surgery, right? I can't even watch when they draw my blood, let alone an open surgery. 5 years. People only ever said my husband was great, that everything would be fine. But this was the first time someone asked me if I was in pain, if I was scared. Her voice was soft, like a girl's whisper. You must have been terrified. When I had a stomach bug, I spent the whole night crying in my mom's arms. I had been cared for by nurses and aides throughout my hospital stay. 15 days, alone in that hospital room. Only the cycle of day and night outside the window kept me company, the clouds, the sun, the rain. I never let myself feel fear or sorrow. I just kept thinking about Leo. Just kept thinking, I need to get better. But now, I collapsed onto her shoulder and broke down. Yes, these 5 years, I was terrified. I was scared on the operating table, scared every time I went in for a scan, scared even by the tiniest flare of stomach acid, too scared to sleep through the night, yet afraid poor sleep would hurt my health even more. Lucia's hand fluttered softly on my back, like butterfly wings, soothing in gentle strokes. Then Thomas's message arrived. I've done the math, even with the materials you've gathered. Given I'm not at fault and you've been a full-time wife, the most you'll get in a divorce is $3 million and the Lotus Garden property. I wasn't surprised by his calculation. I'd already contacted the lawyers and the evidence. Lucia bit her lip and asked, "Why did you still choose to become a full-time wife?" I wiped away my tears and looked at her. Because when you're not healthy, the only thing that feels real is health. After the surgery, I didn't return to work. I became a full-time wife. Palms turned up, asking for money. My friend Laura scolded me, saying it was too much of a gamble, especially with a man whose conscience was hanging by a thread. But I knew I wasn't betting on his conscience. I had simply stopped letting half-baked feminism eat me alive. At this moment, what I needed most was enough time and money to recover my health, love, independence, the future. They were all just mirages. Chapter 11. The first thing I did after becoming a full-time housewife was to praise Thomas in front of his colleagues and superiors. I told them he didn't abandon me when I was diagnosed with cancer, that he never complained about the high cost of treatment, that he was a responsible man who provided generously for his family. I even wrote a heartfelt public thank you letter for him on social media. Those glowing words earned Thomas admiration and a promotion, and in return, I lived a pretty decent life. All the physically demanding tasks were handled by hired help and runners. I had 1 or 2 pieces of each season's expensive designer collections. I never lacked daily spending money. After all, my best friend Laura is the sister of President Kim, the CEO of Thomas's company. Whenever I attended company events, Thomas always made sure I looked polished and radiant, drawing compliments from everyone. Aside from taking care of Leo's needs, I devoted all of my time to myself. Morning yoga and stretching, soaking up the sun, eating clean. In the afternoons, I played tennis with Laura, joined book clubs. Evenings were for reading picture books, soaking my feet, and going to bed early. I never missed a single session of my costly rehabilitation treatments. Ironically, the atmosphere at home became much more harmonious than before. Thomas would often smile with quiet satisfaction at it all. I always responded with a warm, gentle smile. I never argued with him. Most of his needs were taken care of by the housekeeper, and I only occasionally stepped in personally. Thomas assumed I had become more dependent and cautious since becoming a full-time housewife. But in truth, I had simply stepped out emotionally. My heart no longer played the game. For 5 years, I focused solely on healing, physically, mentally, and being present for Leo. Not long ago, I finally received the confirmation I had long hoped for, a clean bill of health. In comparison, Thomas's request for a divorce hardly mattered anymore. Only my health, of body and mind, was real. Only that gave me the strength to stand back up and re-enter the world. As for the 15 years I loved Thomas, and our 10 years of marriage, I've accepted it. That was the ending. Even if we once risked our lives for each other, shared hardship and devotion, this marriage had become one of mutual defense, never of sincerity. Tarnished, ordinary. You've suffered so much these 10 years. Lucia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. The mole by her eye was just as vivid as mine once was. Luciana, I'll help you get through this divorce. Even though I was 15 years older than her. In that moment, this young girl was like both a mother and a goddess, bending down to embrace me, cradling my soul with warmth. Behind her, the city lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows glittered, just like they had that night. Neon in every color, brilliant to the extreme. But I was no longer falling. I had gently come to rest on solid ground. There was no more sadness, no more fear. I once thought heaven sent me to rescue my younger self from making the same mistakes. But in truth, it was she who came to save me. In the end, I was the one who pulled myself from the fire and flood of this world. Chapter 12. Thomas suddenly agreed to my terms and signed the divorce papers. All that was left was to finalize the procedure a month later. Because Lucia had agreed to date him, and she told him directly she didn't want him to make things difficult for his ex-wife. So, he didn't. What a twisted kind of favoritism. When I was seriously ill, he coldly and precisely calculated every detail of our assets. But for the 20-year-old version of me, he didn't care at all about material losses. So did he love me, or not? Lucia wasn't just helping me, she also wanted to take a closer look at the current Thomas. I was proud and stubborn as a girl, So of course she was unconvinced. Unconvinced that her love story with Thomas would end in such a way, so different from what she believed it to be. I welcomed it. Let her run into the wall herself. Let her see clearly, no matter how genuine a man's feelings seem in the moment, they are never worth betting your future on. Let her go back to even the sincerest version of Thomas and never again be foolish. Thomas, like some head-over-heels teenager, threw everything he had at Lucia, just to give her the best. He took her to Michelin-starred restaurants, gave her designer gifts, invited her to travel, but Lucia seemed unimpressed. She had just come back from eating hot pot and drinking half a bottle of Coke, sitting cross-legged on the carpet. She said, that Michelin place wasn't even half as good as today's hot pot. At 20, I had never been troubled by the hardships of life. I was still a student, dreaming of backpacking around the world, chasing symphonies, immune to the glitzy temptations of the world. Her brows scrunched up into a knot. I don't like how he talks to me like he's my dad. What girl likes a man who acts like a dad? Even your actual dad isn't allowed to do that. I let out a low laugh and handed her a plate of freshly cut melon and duck snacks. She dug in happily, enjoying every bite. Thomas sent me a photo. It was of the hot pot place we used to frequent. You used to go there a lot before you got sick. It's been a long time since I saw you enjoy eating. No wonder Lucia had liked today's hot pot so much. I turned off my phone, rested my chin on my hand, and continued watching Lucia eat. Young, healthy me could eat anything and enjoy all of it. How wonderful. I continued with my calm, orderly daily routine. The divorce had barely caused a ripple. Morning yoga and stretching, sunlight, clean food. In the afternoon, tennis with my rich bestie Laura. Afterward, I had to meet a client. Ever since my health improved noticeably last year, I had started taking on the marketing consulting work Laura introduced me to. And now, things were finally turning around. Today, I was about to meet a major client who was willing to give me my first big solo contract. Chapter 13. The setting sun poured through the office building's glass walls, soaking the lobby in gold. I hadn't expected my client to be in the same building as Thomas. While waiting for Kevin, I ran into Thomas as he came downstairs with some coworkers. We hadn't seen each other in 10 days. He was wearing a casual linen polo shirt and a black sports watch, clean cut and handsome. Just like Lucia said, he used to dress too old-fashioned. Now he looked much younger, but the loose threads on his shirt hem and the dark circles under his eyes hinted that things weren't going as smoothly as they seemed. Lucia told me Thomas had been arguing with his mother frequently on the phone lately, mostly over little things about raising Leo. Luciana. Thomas had already walked up to me. He pursed his lips, trying to act reserved. Here to see me? I hadn't said a word yet. He looked down into my eyes, which glinted faintly in the golden light. That dress, you bought it a few years ago when I took you shopping. It looks way better than those lounge clothes you used to wear. You suit tailored waists. It was just something formal I threw on. When I didn't respond, he added, you can come visit Leo. You're still his mother. Is that Luciana? Looking up, I saw Kevin walking over from a distance. He stood tall, with a refined face and dressed in a simple white golf outfit. Sorry, I'm late. I picked up my documents and nodded. Nice to see you, Mr. Chan. I just arrived myself. Kevin nodded in return. I tossed a quick line to Thomas. I'm here for a meeting with a client. Before his look of surprise could fully settle, I was already walking toward the elevator with Kevin. Kevin's company was a startup, but well-funded. The deal was large. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and began presenting the proposal I'd spent a month preparing. By the time we wrapped up, it was already dark. After 120 minutes, Kevin looked at me with an intensity that felt like he could see through me. Feeling uneasy, I closed my presentation and lowered my head. Then, a flash, his face sparked a memory. Kevin was my college roommate's ex-boyfriend. I let out a surprised laugh and covered my mouth. I just remembered, you're Yao Yao's ex. He pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses with a single finger. Glad you finally recognized me, after 2 hours of pitching. He didn't have Thomas's sharp features, but he had something Thomas lacked, a quiet confidence. Kevin ran his hand over the proposal with my name, Luciana, on the cover. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes curved with a subtle smile. I agreed to meet only because I knew you were that Luciana. I heard from Laura that you got divorced. I nodded. His dimple was deep. Happy divorce. Kevin signed the initial contract not long after. 300,000 renminbi. Tight timeline, fast pace. For the next 2 weeks, I occasionally bumped into Thomas in the building. He was often holding 2 coffees, naturally handing me one. I remember you used to love iced Americanos. I took it upstairs and gave it to Kevin. Thomas remembered I liked coffee in college, but he had forgotten after stomach cancer. I couldn't drink anything that harsh. At 9 p.m., I ran into him again in the elevator. Thomas was wearing a crisp white shirt, a platinum watch, and clean white sneakers. He looked tired, rubbing at his temple, still good-looking, and I couldn't help but laugh to myself. 15 years of memories, at least, were spent on a beautiful face. My youth wasn't totally wasted. He seemed momentarily stunned when he saw me. "You're working this late?" He furrowed his brow, voice caught between concern and blame. "Luciana, I gave you so much money. Do you really need to push yourself this hard?" "First of all, that money, I fought for it," I said, standing tall and meeting his gaze. "Second, I like working. Otherwise, if I'd just let myself rot back then, I wouldn't have ended up sick in the first place." Thomas's disapproval had never been loud or cruel, just quietly dismissive. When I got laid off after getting sick, it was because I couldn't cut it. When I struggled to pick up projects again, it was because I lost my edge. I saw a familiar glimmer of awe flash through his eyes. He looked away, uneasy. "I thought, after all those years at home, you didn't like working anymore. But take care of your health, okay?" I looked straight at him, my voice calm and even. "Thomas, it's a little late for your concern. It just sounds fake now. A man who never cared for me when I was truly ill. Any verbal concern now is just emotional manipulation." The elevator arrived. I walked in first and hit the close button without hesitation. Right before the doors shut, I said, "Don't forget, tomorrow at 9 a.m., the Civil Affairs Bureau." Thomas's eyes shimmered like he had just woken from a long dream. Chapter 14. When I came home that night, Lucia was asleep on the couch. Lately, she'd been sleeping longer and longer, her expression often dazed. I had a feeling Lucia was about to leave. I'd heard Thomas had taken on a major client and gotten busy again. His passion for her had already waned by half. Money and power were still more seductive to him than love. Rain twisted the neon lights outside, casting a soft pink hue on her pale skin. I walked over to her. She slowly opened her eyes, the corners tinged with red. Then she sat up and lazily stretched, revealing her smooth, flat stomach, so different from mine. Still half asleep, she asked, "When are you finalizing the divorce with Thomas?" "Tomorrow." She nodded, her silky black hair falling loosely across her narrow shoulders. "I argued with Thomas today. He switched secretaries. This one's skinny and fair-skinned, really young, and they seemed way too familiar. It pissed me off. The younger me loved purely, so I was also possessive. I didn't allow him to interact with other women outside of work or study. Young Thomas had felt honored by that. "Luciana, you must be crazy about me. Finally, you don't know how jealous I get seeing other guys near you." Lucia turned her gaze toward me. "He said he's already sick of being nagged by his mom and his kid, and that I shouldn't add to the drama. He even wiped the corner of my eye and said, 'Why do you have the same mole as Luciana, but can't be as mature and understanding as her? Why do you always drive me crazy?'" What Thomas said was a paradox. How do you love someone calmly? Only by not loving them. I only became understanding after I stopped loving him. That's the truth. She frowned deeply. This was a guy who used to get shy when he saw me. A man who once loved me so much he'd risk his life. A man who, 15 years later, still fell in love with me all over again. How could he change? I smiled. Because true feelings change. Because life is vast. And love and hate are so small. The next day, the divorce at the Civil Affairs Bureau went quickly. When Thomas held the little green booklet in his hands, he took 2 steps back, like it had just hit him. Outside, the rain was pouring. It was a sheet of water that wouldn't lift between heaven and earth. The heavy heat was finally gone. City A's rainy season had officially arrived. Thomas spoke. "I'll drive you home. It's hard to get a taxi in this rain, and you'll get soaked." People really are strange creatures. All those years, storms, snow, heavy rain, he never once offered to drive me. Seeing my silence, Thomas suddenly said, "Luciana, without you." I've finally realized, the lights go out. Shirts get wrinkled. The kid throws tantrums. And that pain in my left leg, from the steel pins, is unbearable when it rains. He rubbed his temples. "Luciana, is life always this complicated?" I glanced sideways at him. He let out a sigh and smiled at me. "You haven't seen Leo in a month. Want to come home and visit him?" I shook my head. He grabbed my arm. Flustered. "You don't love Leo anymore? Wasn't it your son who kept you going when you were sick?" I froze. Back in the hospital, I told myself I had to recover. I had to get better quickly. My little Leo was only 4. So young, so willful. He'd still say "I love you" with that sweet, high voice. How could I bear the thought of him growing up without a mother? But later, I could bear it. Chapter 15. It had nothing to do with the arrival of my 20-year-old self. I had already decided to divorce Thomas. It happened on a beautiful morning. The housekeeper accidentally spilled water on one of Thomas's gift boxes. He was furious, his voice low and condescending. He scolded me. "Luciana, you need to be more careful. That gift was brought back from abroad by a friend. I'm giving it to a client at lunch today." I quietly stirred the lean pork congee in my bowl. Across from me, Leo was silently eating, his expression unreadable. Thomas sighed. "Luciana, you're already failing as a wife. Can't you at least be a better mother?" Leo's grades have dropped lately. He didn't even win anything in his last piano competition. I had been helping him study. He had deliberately left the test incomplete. The piano failure? Thomas brought the wrong sheet music. And the person in question, Leo, still kept his head down and ate silently. On the way to drop Leo off at school, I asked for the first time, "Leo, you're 9. Why do you never speak up for your mom?" He turned to look out the window, saying nothing. Leo had grown more and more withdrawn. He rarely showed empathy. I loved him. I accepted him, but I was tired. There was a profound sense of emptiness. Raising a child might just be a long journey toward disappointment. Outside the car window, the morning light mixed with smog spilled gold over the horizon. Just like these 10 years, undefined, dim, without meaning. But that sorrow vanished quickly, because in a while, I had a tennis match. In the afternoon, I had to work on a proposal from a client Laura introduced. Most importantly, I had received a report that morning. 5 years with no recurrence. I was fully cured. My happiness was quiet, but vast. And it had nothing to do with this family. It was time for me to go. "Luciana, what a coincidence." A Porsche pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. It was Kevin. Chapter 16. Kevin glanced at Thomas and said, "We might as well ride back to the office together. There's one detail we need to finalize on the proposal." I nodded and was just about to walk over when a hand grabbed mine. After so many years, I saw that familiar glint in his eyes again. His voice was low, drowned in the rain. "Luciana, my arm hurts. This used to be my weakness. No matter what Thomas had done, if he said something like that, I would give in." The rain roared around us, humidity wrapping everything in mist. I peeled his fingers off mine, inch by inch, and as he stared at me in shock, I smiled, light and carefree. "What does that have to do with me?" Pain shot through my wrist. He had pulled me back. Thomas's voice was so earnest, so sincere, but what he said was, "Luciana, that man, he won't accept your stretch marks or surgery scars." Smack! I slapped him across the face. His chiseled features instantly bloomed red. I let out a scoff. "Thomas, don't disgust me. One more word, and I'll take all those shady side incomes of yours and have a nice long chat with your internal auditors." Over the years, while tracking his hidden assets, I had kept every single bit of non-compliant evidence. It's cold at the top. There's always someone who wants your seat and someone who wants to pull you down. As I closed the car door, Thomas remained rooted in place, unmoving, his eyes locked on me, unblinking. Chapter 17. Kevin took me to a private kitchen restaurant. While we were chatting, a message from Thomas arrived. "I'm sorry, I went too far today." Kevin glanced at my phone as I set it down. Your ex-husband's still bothering you? Want me to handle it? Lately, memories from college had started coming back to me too. Every time I ran into Kevin on campus, his eyes lit up in this strange way whenever he looked at me, so I always avoided him. Later, he also got accepted into the same 2+2 exchange program, but I stayed behind for Thomas, and we lost touch. Now that we're adults, I understand what Kevin meant back then, but as for love, I'm indifferent now. What I had with Thomas once burned at the temperature of 1,000,000 degrees. And yet, look how it ended. Better to travel, read, work, hike, Kevin asked. Laura said you've been looking into academic programs abroad. I had. After a 5-year gap, I needed a legitimate opportunity to rebuild my professional profile, to re-enter the workplace, and I really wanted to live abroad for a while, even just for the change in scenery. Most importantly, my dividend payout had finally arrived. Kevin slid a document in front of me. It was an application for a prestigious 1-year program at an Ivy League school. It would take immense resources and connections to get accepted. With his hands folded under his chin, Kevin looked like a large, proud retriever. Luciana, I'm willing to put all my resources behind you. Think of it as a divorce gift from me to you. Chapter 18. I came home holding the project packet. Outside the window, neon lights flickered behind Lucia. She sat on the carpet, wearing a camisole and shorts. A faint scent of whiskey hung in the air. She was swirling a glass in her hand. Her cheeks were flushed red as she looked up at me. I've never been good with alcohol. She staggered to her feet, pulled me toward her, and lifted the hem of my shirt. The twisted stretch marks along my waist had faded to pale white, less visible now. One surgical scar stretched across my abdomen. Her soft, fair fingers trembled slightly as she traced the marks and scar. Her dark, glistening eyes instantly turned red, her mouth trembling. Thomas got drunk today and said you have stretch marks, and a scar, and cancer. He said, how could you possibly expect anyone to love you after divorce? Luciana, is childbirth really that costly? You didn't just get sick and have surgery, right? I sighed softly. Yes, childbirth is like that. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I'm healthy and cheerful. How could it be like this? And how could he say that about you? She cried so bitterly, like she had lived through it herself. But I will always stand by myself. I will always grieve for myself. She looked up into my eyes, solemnly. Luciana, I'm going abroad. I'll ask my dad to give him some money as a thank you payment. I wiped her tears and smiled warmly. Yes. Luciana, go forward. Fly as far as you can. When life isn't yours to control, don't step into marriage. Don't step into motherhood. I leaned my forehead against hers and smiled. I love you so much. I love the original version of me. She looked into my eyes, tears flowing uncontrollably, nodding with all her strength. She cried until her voice went hoarse. I gently coaxed her. I got us VIP tickets to the French production of Notre Dame de Paris. We're flying to City C the day after tomorrow, okay? Her sobs came to an abrupt halt. Really? Then I tapped her nose. Luciana, when you go back, remember to buy some Apple stock. Get rich. She burst out laughing, clear, bright laughter filling the whole room. At 20, my world had been so wide, so full of purpose and passion. Thomas might have made me cry, but he was never worth losing everything over. I will always pull myself out of the flames and flood of this world, 1,000 times over. Chapter 19. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to City C with Lucia to watch the opera. The next morning, she wore a beautiful white dress, but under the gentle sunlight, her body began to turn transparent. She waved at me. I'm going back now. Then she tilted her head with a mischievous grin. By the way, I slapped Thomas yesterday and told him I am the future Luciana. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. I said, you idiot. The only person you've ever loved in this life is me. Oh, and I tagged HR on social media and accused Thomas of harassing me. A 20-year-old college student said I had to run away from the harassment. Caused a huge scene. I clapped my hand over my mouth and burst out laughing. Her pale skin was almost transparent now. She raised an eyebrow proudly. I sold everything Thomas gave me. Got someone to help. Even if I probably got ripped off. but it was still a decent amount. It's all in the top drawer of my room. Her eyes sparkled like stars. Goodbye. And then, she was gone in the morning light. The apartment fell silent in an instant. Sunlight filled every corner of the home. I hadn't even come out of the moment's loss yet when Thomas showed up like a stray dog. I hadn't changed the door code. He stood there, staring at me in a daze. Where's Lucia? She's gone, Thomas muttered blankly. Lucia said, she was the 20-year-old you. He stumbled forward and gently touched the mole beneath my eye. Yeah, you've always had this mole. It's just faded now. I pushed his hand away. I thought she was just being dramatic because we fought. He spoke to himself in panic. But she loved 100 years of solitude. She loved opera. She was proud, stubborn, a little fierce, but incredibly capable. She only liked gardenia-scented perfume. She'd always tap my furrowed brow with her index finger. She'd only let me kiss her on the cheek. His words came faster and faster, his face turning pale. Everything she loved was exactly what I once loved. But after 5 years of juggling parenting and work chaos, I gave it all up. And after 5 years as a full-time homemaker, I stopped sharing joy with him. She wasn't lying. His eyes turned red as realization finally hit. His voice cracked. Luciana, she was you. Chapter 20. The sound of traffic outside the window suddenly cut off. Thomas had figured it out. Maybe he did truly love me. Once. But I would never forgive him. The sound of the cars returned abruptly. He shook his head in disbelief. Eyes lost. Gripping both my hands. Luciana. From beginning to end. It's always been you. We shouldn't be apart. I finally laughed. Thomas. What you loved was the radiant, wild, rose-thorned Luciana. You loved my raw life force. I curled my lip. But you drained me, crushed me, let me wither into dust. He shook his head. Desperate. No. I just fell in love with you. I sneered. Then why couldn't you bear to look at my body with stretch marks? Why couldn't you stand to hear my complaints? Why did you trap me in the exhausting triangle of parenting, housework, and work? He rushed to explain. Isn't that how everyone lives? Luciana, life is just exhausting. Thomas's nose turned red. His handsome features were filled with emotion. He choked on his words. I was just lost. But deep down, I've always loved you. Really? I looked at him, cold as ice. Wasn't it you who hid assets when I got laid off and diagnosed with cancer? Wasn't it you who recoiled at my postpartum, cancer-ridden body? Wasn't it you who ignored my pain, my silence, and always treated me with suspicion? Every vibration of my voice tasted like blood. Thomas, the Luciana you loved was alive and beside you this whole time. But you chose to disappear. You chose not to see her. He gripped my arms tighter, a tear rolling down his cheek. No, it's not true. It's not. Thanks to 2 years of training, I broke free. I looked at him with nothing but disdain, lips curling into a cold smile. Thomas, face it. We've known each other for 17 years, loved each other for 15, married for 10. This is how it ends. I turned to leave, but before I did, I warned him, don't come looking for me again, otherwise, I'll send everything I have to your company's internal audit team. And so Thomas stood there, lost, shattered, bathed in sunlight. Chapter 21. From that day on, Thomas seemed to return to our days of dating. He sent countless messages every day. Leo had a rough time with his piano practice today. Didn't eat much. And had a fight with my mom. The 3-cup chicken at the cafeteria wasn't as good as yours. I got promoted. Leo got hurt in tennis class today. But most distinctively, every morning came with the same line. Luciana, my left leg hurts so much. That sentence was like the endless rainy season, dampening the entire 15 years of my past life. But I had already walked through that long monsoon. Now, the skies had cleared. When I handed Kevin the project materials, he, for the first time, crossed a boundary and held my hand. Luciana, you know I liked you in college. When Laura told me the person she wanted to introduce was you, I barely slept that night. His eyes were bright and sincere as he looked at me. Luciana, give me a chance. Let's try. I said. But I'm no longer the same girl from college, radiant, persistent, proud. He gave a soft laugh. Do you think I'm still the same as I was back then? I fell for the woman you are now. That's the only reason I want to be with you. He held my hand, his palm warm and steady. I want to help you go back to school also because I want you to stay away from Thomas and his entanglements. After all, I know how much you once gave up for him in college. Kevin looked me in the eye, calm and open. But Luciana, I'm willing to offer every resource I have to lift you up. I smiled and shook my head. I still need some time. Or rather, I don't want to step into any romantic relationship. I don't believe a man, a stranger, could truly love a body like mine, marked and worn. Kevin, I've already transferred half the tuition to you. I admitted I needed his network. But not him, he hurriedly said. Luciana, I didn't mean to imply. I raised a finger to my lips, smiling with quiet confidence. Kevin, I'm more capable than you think. 5 years ago, I used my severance and savings to purchase a substantial offshore dividend insurance policy. That was the backup plan I prepared for myself while being a full-time housewife. And in the 5 years since, all of Thomas's lavish household money and luxury gifts, I used them wisely and strategically. Even if Thomas found out now, he'd have no way to touch those insurance policies. I don't just want health, I want a good life after. And now, fortune has finally turned in my favor. The investment returns over the past 2 years have been more than generous. Chapter 22. The day I received the offer, I posted a rare update on my social media. Set sail. That evening, when I went downstairs, Thomas was standing at the entrance of my building, smoking. Wisps of smoke curled between his fingers, but they couldn't mask the exhaustion that clung to his body. I'd heard that Lucia's post on social media triggered a company investigation into Thomas's appointment. Things hadn't been going well for him lately. His shirt was rumpled, stubble shadowed his jaw, and dark circles hung under his eyes. When he saw me, his eyes glazed over for a moment, and he blurted out, "You look beautiful today." I was just wearing a black dress I'd worn countless times before. Thomas looked at me intently, voice hoarse and subdued. "Luciana, I heard from Laura, you're going abroad?" I smiled. Time to fulfill the dream I once put on hold. His eyes reddened slightly, his voice breaking. "Luciana, it just doesn't feel like this is how we're supposed to end." He reached out and grabbed my wrist. "What about Leo? Don't you care about him anymore? You couldn't let go of him even when you went into surgery. How can you now just walk away and live for yourself?" I pulled my hand free and turned to leave. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pleading, his body radiating heat. "Just once, one last time, come with me somewhere, please, just this once?" He drove me to Lotus Garden, our very first apartment. It had been tidied up, quiet and spotless. Thomas was visibly nervous, like he was meeting an important client for the first time. "Luciana, do you remember? The night we moved in, we were so happy we cried in each other's arms all night." Even the corners of his eyes were glowing with nostalgia. Later, when Leo was born, we fenced off the living room. He used to crawl around all day. The doorbell rang. His mother arrived with Leo. Chapter 23. She didn't look as vibrant as she used to, thinner, more fatigued. She glanced at me and sneered. "You've been living well while shirking your duties as a mother." Thomas quickly told her to leave. Then he pulled Leo closer and said gently, "Leo, do you remember this home? You were born here. We didn't move until you were 3. Look, your height marks are still on the wall." Leo and I watched Thomas without expression as he paced back and forth, talking to himself, lost in memories. Then he crouched down and looked at Leo with hope in his eyes. "Leo, Mommy is going abroad. Don't you miss her? Can you ask her to stay?" Under Thomas's intense gaze, Leo shook his head. "I don't miss Mommy." The room fell into sudden silence. "What did you say?" Thomas exploded. Bang! A dull sound echoed, his palm landed hard on Leo's back. The boy's small frame trembled, but he bit his lip, refusing to speak. I looked at Thomas calmly, just like he used to look at me when I was hysterical after giving birth. "Thomas, how did you become like this?" I asked softly. "Is that really something so important to say?" He froze. Years ago, he had aimed that same bullet at me, and now it hit him squarely between the eyes. He swayed slightly, covering his eyes as if trying to shield himself from his own cruelty, from his current helplessness. With his shoulders slumped, defeated and lost, He turned and walked away. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Luciana. For someone as proud as Thomas. This was rock bottom. Chapter 24. Leo and I stood in the cramped living room. I could tell, despite his stiff expression, Leo was completely at a loss. I gently held his hand and asked, "What happened to Grandma?" Leo replied nonchalantly, "She got too tired taking care of me, picking me up from school, taking me to lessons, talking to teachers. I'm a picky eater too, so every mealtime is like torture for her. Then she complains to Dad every day, and Dad gets mad and yells at her. Yeah, it's just this loop, over and over." Leo touched the sofa. "Did I used to crawl on this? I remember it." He was always a precocious child. Those bright eyes, just like mine at 20, looked up and said, "Mom, your school for the study abroad program is a really good one. You know?" He nodded. "I heard Aunt Laura mention it, so I looked it up on my iPad. You used to tell me, when I was little, that once I grew up, you'd go study abroad. Someone came to visit me before, a big sister who looked just like you. But Mrs. Lee said she didn't really look like you." He rubbed his face against the back of my hand, his eyes curving with a small smile. "Mom, you used to be so beautiful, so full of life. Your laughter was so bright. I really liked that version of you. I'm sorry I never knew what to say whenever you and Dad weren't getting along. Mom, was it because of me that you didn't leave sooner?" I had just said no, but he gripped my hand, damp and warm. "You should go. Fly as high as you can." His upturned eyes shimmered with unshed tears. His voice choked and boyishly crisp. "When you come back someday, just come see me, okay?" His small teardrops seared my hand like fire. My heart swelled painfully, about to burst. The world blurred in front of me. Chapter 25. After that day, Thomas never showed up again, but he still sent me messages from time to time. He would go through the memories from our 15 years together, piece by piece, like retracing a map of our love, trying to find something, anything, that could erase what he'd done. I blocked him. Studying abroad filled my days. Or, to be honest, it was hard. At 35, grinding through intensive pre-program coursework was exhausting. Whenever Kevin had business in the U.S., he'd stop by to see me. We talked about networking, strategy, exhibitions, food, never about feelings. Leo wrote me emails every week about exams, games, piano. Never once did he mention his father. I met many people, and through Lara's connections, I started picking up client projects again. Half a year after the program ended, I returned home. Unfortunately, Thomas had bounced back from his short downfall. He'd just been promoted to president of Greater China, but whether he soared or stumbled no longer concerned me. When I returned to my apartment, the housekeeper had already cleaned everything, but on the table, I found an unsigned letter. "Luciana, how are you? I've been studying abroad for over half a year now. Everything here is so new. The university professors are super strict. Thomas is doing pretty well now too." I ran my fingers over the familiar, lively handwriting and couldn't help but smile. Just then, rustling sounds at the door. Someone had arrived. It was Thomas, 20 years old again. He stood at my door in a white shirt and jeans, looking uneasy and at a loss, but his eyes never strayed from me for even a second, staring, unblinking, then slowly filled with tears. So young, so clean-cut, handsome, and shattered. My heart shifted, just a little, beating wildly. It was hard to imagine how the 20-year-old me had ever managed to say no to him. I slowly stepped forward and asked, "Why are you here?" Tears suddenly streamed down his face. Thomas's lips trembled again and again, and he asked softly, "Luciana, 15 years from now, is it really impossible for us to be together? Was it really all my fault?" His voice rang clear and trembling, full of sincerity and fear. My heart twisted, just slightly. I rose up on tiptoe and kissed the corner of his mouth. His eyes widened, shocked, elated. He moved to hold me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. I said gently, "Thomas, you stopped loving me first. I was with you for so many years, right beside you, and you never saw me." He hunched over and wept, choking on sobs as he wiped his eyes again and again. He scrubbed his face until it turned raw. This tall young man, so utterly fragile. I told him, "You should go now. Let's not see each other again." It was my final goodbye to the past. Later, it was Leo who called me crying. That's how I found out Thomas had died. Suddenly. Chapter 26. In the security footage from the building, a college-aged young man stormed out and stabbed Thomas to death. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice shrill with rage. Why? Why did you betray Luciana? It was you. You're the reason she and I couldn't be together. I hate you. You deserve to die. The police summoned me to give a statement, asking if I recognized the man. I shook my head. A few days later, a barely noticed article popped up on social media. Murder suspect vanishes overnight from detention center. Almost no one clicked it. The high-profile case of a corporate golden boy stabbed to death in broad daylight quietly faded from the public eye. When I went to pick up Leo and pack up some things, I found a file Thomas had prepared, an entire legal complaint. It contained the contract from when he'd secretly mortgaged our Riverside apartment 3 years ago. He had planned to sue me, to use money to wear me down. But in the end, he was killed by the only person who ever truly, fiercely loved me, himself. Story 2. I got involved with Joel out of a sense of obligation. It took 3 years for this obsessive, controlling man to accept me. At 20, I registered our marriage, then unexpectedly got pregnant and gave birth to Lucas. By the time Lucas turned 7, I was still waiting for a wedding. Joel was always insecure, constantly testing my boundaries, repeatedly trying to confirm whether I truly loved him, and my son followed his example, never learning to respect me. Then one day, my mother passed away. After handling her cremation all by myself, I dragged my exhausted body back home, only to find my son, unaware of what had happened, had deliberately locked me out of the house. Chapter 1. It was pouring rain outside. I took off my coat and used it to cover the urn, pressing the doorbell over and over again. It was only early evening, but the sky was already dark. Heavy clouds pressed low above me, with occasional flashes of lightning and the roar of thunder. The wind howled like it was the end of the world. Just like my heart, my sobs were drowned by the relentless downpour, the sky crying with me as the tears soaked me completely. By the time I stopped pressing the doorbell, I was pounding the door with clenched fists, nearly gritting my teeth in frustration. Inside the small villa, the lights on the first floor were bright, and I could faintly see the large TV screen in the living room playing a cheerful cartoon. Joel was away on a business trip, but my own son, Lucas, was inside the warm house. He wasn't deaf. He could hear me. He was doing this on purpose. Changing the door code after I left had become one of his favorite pranks. Happening time and time again, it seemed my persistent doorbell ringing had finally irritated him. Lucas pressed the intercom and snapped. "Why didn't you take the spare key when you left? You're so dumb. Figure it out yourself." His young voice, distorted through the machine, sounded harsh and unfamiliar in the noisy environment. I leaned against the corner of the wall, wiping the rain and tears from my eyes as I tried to protect the urn in my arms. I didn't want my mother to get wet. I couldn't take care of her when she was alive, and now that she was gone, this was the only thing I could do for her. I suppressed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to speak coldly to Lucas. "I'm telling you for the last time." Lucas opened the door. The intercom flickered, and I could hear a bit of the TV in the background. Then, nothing. The small light in front of me went out. The world fell silent. I leaned against the wall, my eyes red, my body stiff, standing like a statue in the storm. Maybe a long time passed, or maybe just a moment. I calmly accepted the reality that I had lost my son. I smiled slightly, blinking away the tears, and whispered to my mother, "It's okay, Mom. Let's go. I'll take you home." With that, I turned and walked away into the rain, without looking back. Starting today, I lost my mother, and Lucas lost his too. Chapter 2. I took a cab back to the Southern District. There aren't many fancy high-rise buildings here, just a collection of old, worn-out apartment complexes. But I felt a sense of peace and relief like never before. As I climbed the narrow, dimly lit staircase, The warm yellow motion sensor lights turned on with each step, as if they were welcoming me, saying, "It's been a while, welcome home." But when I reached the 5th floor and stood in front of my familiar door, I realized with a sinking feeling that my pockets were empty. Water dripped from my soaked pants, quickly pooling at my feet. A gust of cold wind swept through the hallway, sending chills up my arms, raising goosebumps. I didn't hesitate for too long and turned to knock on my neighbor's door. Soon, the door opened, revealing a young woman with messy hair, wearing pajamas and holding half an apple in her mouth. She looked at me, and I looked at her, both of us frozen for a moment. I had expected the familiar aunt I knew to answer the door, but instead, I blinked slowly, letting the raindrops fall from my eyelashes, and forced a polite smile. "Sorry to bother you, but I remember my mom left a spare key with you. Could you please give it to me?" My former best friend, Clara, took the apple from her mouth and looked at me for a while, her gaze complicated as she took in my bedraggled appearance. Then, in a cold, distant voice, she said, "Wait a moment." She went inside, rummaged around, and handed me the key. I took it, whispering a small thank you, and then, silence. I didn't have the energy to deal with our broken relationship at that moment. I gave her a half-hearted smile, then used the key to open the door to my own apartment and stepped inside. I turned on the light, and the sudden brightness stung my tired eyes, causing more tears to fall down my cheeks. The apartment was spotless, just as I remembered it. Everything was in its place, as if my mother had just stepped out to buy groceries and would be back any minute. I carefully placed the urn on the table. My fingers brushed against a thin layer of dust on the surface, and I froze. The tears came rushing down, unstoppable. I had helped her escape a failed marriage, freeing her from that cheating, abusive scumbag. I had promised to buy her a big house, to give her the life she deserved, but she always refused. She said she was already living well, her daughter was married now, and she didn't want me to feel torn between two homes, worried that I'd be mistreated in my new family. All the money I had sent her over the years, she had quietly saved away. It turned into a small savings book, along with her ashes, one of the few things she left me. After my mom divorced, her favorite thing to do was look through the photo albums of Lucas and me. Her rough hands would leave marks of longing on the glossy pages. But whenever I invited her to stay at my home for a few days to spend more time with her grandson, she would usually leave after just one meal. Joel didn't like having outsiders in his house. Though polite, he was always cold toward her. And Lucas, no matter how much I scolded him, always wore his irritation and disdain for his grandmother on his face. I thought I had time to change all of that, but I didn't know my mother had cancer. She hid it from me, refusing to tell me. By the time I found out and took her to the hospital for treatment, it was already too late. I sat in the chair, silently crying, consumed with guilt and regret. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I thought Lucas had brought the driver to come find me, and I immediately frowned, filled with anger as I went to open the door. But standing outside was Clara, holding a tray of ginger tea, along with a chubby little boy about 4 or 5 years old. Seeing me frozen in place, Clara sighed. She pulled the little boy inside without hesitation and said, "You're soaked to the bone, aren't you going to take a shower and change? Do you want to catch a cold?" Chapter 3. The house still had many of my old clothes, neatly washed and folded by my mother, stored away in the wardrobe. After I finished my shower and stepped out, my eyes red and puffy, I was taken aback by the scene before me. The TV was on. The little boy sat quietly on the couch watching, and Clara was skillfully cleaning the house with a rag. When she saw me come out, the boy immediately turned and sweetly called out, "Hi, godmother." I stood there, towel in hand, dumbfounded, staring at Clara. She handed me a bowl of freshly cooked porridge, gesturing for me to eat, and calmly introduced herself. "This is my son, Oscar. He's 5. I almost choked on the porridge, my eyes widening in disbelief. "You got married?" It wasn't that I was overreacting, it's just that, ever since our school days, Clara had been a staunch advocate of never getting married. She had even made countless plans about how we'd open an elderly care home together when we got old. Clara raised an eyebrow and said, "Who said you need to get married to have a kid?" "Helen," You're out of touch with the times. She explained that Oscar was the child she had with her most handsome ex-boyfriend. Though they didn't last long, they had split amicably. The guy knew about the child and occasionally sent money for support. He was good to Oscar. But last year, he got married, and to avoid any complications, Clara had cut ties with him. I glanced at Oscar with a bit of concern. What about him? So many years of friendship, and our understanding was still there. Clara didn't need me to finish my sentence to know what I meant. She casually waved her hand, and Oscar immediately jumped off the couch, huffing as he ran over, tilting his head up to look at his mom, his bright, puppy-like eyes shining. Clara smiled, pinching his chubby cheeks. He's carefree. Like me, he doesn't care who his dad is. Clara patted the back of his head, and Oscar immediately turned to me, wrapping his short arms around my leg. In his sweet, childish voice, he said, "Godmother, you're so pretty. Can you be my mommy too?" That word, mommy, left me a little dazed. Lucas had become a little tyrant at home, growing more rebellious over the years. He took pleasure in playing pranks on me, using a child's pure malice to hurt me, and he seemed to enjoy watching me get upset. And at some point, he stopped calling me mom. He started addressing me by my full name. It had been so long since I heard him call me mom. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. But Oscar's mommy brought a rare sense of joy to my heart. I crouched down, pinched his cheeks, and smiled. I already reserved the position of your godmother before you were even born. So of course, I can be your mommy too. Oscar cheered, throwing his little arms around my neck, cuddling up to me affectionately. He really was like a fluffy golden retriever puppy, much cuter than Lucas. From above, Clara's sarcastic voice chimed in. I thought someone had completely forgotten all our promises. How could I forget? You're my best friend in the world. If it weren't for marrying Joel, who forcibly isolated me, refusing to let me contact anyone for a long time, we wouldn't have drifted apart like this. Speak of the devil. Suddenly, my phone rang. The caller was Joel. Chapter 4. Where are you? As soon as I answered, that familiar, slightly irritated yet lazy, magnetic voice came through the line. Clara gestured for Oscar to lower the volume on the TV, then crossed her arms and stood to the side, glaring at me. Oscar glanced at his mom, then mimicked her stance, folding his little arms and blinking his big eyes at me. The two of them looked like they were cut from the same mold, and I couldn't help but smile. Joel, having heard nothing from me, was silent for a moment. Joel's tone softened a bit, almost coaxing. Lucas couldn't sleep. He wants you to read him a bedtime story. Helen, don't hold a grudge against the child. There it was again. Every time Lucas and I had a conflict, this was all Joel ever said. Don't hold a grudge against the child. As if no matter what Lucas did wrong, no matter how he hurt me, I wasn't supposed to hold it against him, because Lucas idolized him. All those little needle-like jabs, sharp and constant, never reached Joel. He thought it was no big deal, just harmless mischief, a child's playfulness that adults shouldn't take seriously. I let out a soft sigh, feeling exhausted. I really didn't want to argue anymore. Calmly, I asked, "When are you coming back?" On the other end of the line, Joel chuckled, as if he was smugly thinking, "I knew you'd ask that." Just before he left on his business trip, his overly flirtatious secretary sent me a picture. In the photo, the petite secretary was clinging to Joel, her small hands clutching his loosely tied necktie. Joel's tall, lean figure stood by the office desk, his arms braced behind him, his dark lashes casting shadows over his eyes. There was the faintest hint of a smile on his thin lips, though nothing explicit was shown. The pose and the atmosphere were undeniably intimate. Anyone could see something wasn't right. At that time, I was already overwhelmed by the stress of my mother's worsening illness. Seeing that photo, I couldn't hold back my anger. I exploded and had a huge fight with Joel. Of course, it was mostly me shouting. Joel just stood there, calmly watching me, amused by my jealousy and frustration. Only when I was too upset to continue did he finally speak, as if it was beneath him to explain. His excuse this time? The secretary had been tying his tie and accidentally fell into his arms. He didn't even touch her. I demanded to know why anyone else had to tie his tie. Sure, he didn't touch her, but he didn't push her away immediately either. Did he? As a married man, did he not have any boundaries? Joel had tried to soothe me with a few words, but this time, I refused to back down. His expression turned cold, and he told me I needed to calm down. Then he left for the office, and the next day, he went on this business trip. The most ridiculous part? I found out about his trip through that same secretary. That's when the silent treatment began. In the past, it never lasted more than 3 days. I always ended up being the one to make peace. This time, Joel was still waiting for me to apologize first. But now, 7 or 8 days had passed, and Joel was still waiting for a call that wasn't coming. It just so happened that Lucas had complained to him. So Joel took the opportunity to call me, offering me an easy way out. After a soft chuckle, as I expected, he asked, "You know you were wrong, right?" He was waiting for me to apologize, admit my mistake, and soothe his ego with sweet words. Only once he was satisfied, once I had comforted him enough, would he graciously forgive me and then, as a reward, tell me that he would be coming back tomorrow. 10 years. He never got tired of using this tactic. But now, I am tired of it. I stayed silent for a long time, long enough for Joel to notice that something was off. He called out to me, testing the waters. "Honey?" I imitated his soft chuckle, my tone so calm it was like I was discussing the weather. "Joel, come back soon. Let's get a divorce." Chapter 5. That night, Clara and I lay in bed together for the first time in ages. Oscar wanted to sleep between us, but Clara picked him up and moved him to the side near the wall. At first, he flailed his little arms and legs in protest, but within a minute, he was sound asleep, snoring softly like a little pig. Kids sure have great sleep quality. I lay there staring at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes. Clara rolled over, draping her arm over me, gently patting my back. Tears welled up, and I turned my head to look at her, my voice choking with emotion. "Mom, she's gone." Clara had seen the urn. She knew. After a moment of silence, she hugged me and continued to pat my back, offering no empty words of comfort, just the one thing that had carried us through more than 20 years of friendship. "Sweetheart, I'm here." That night, I felt like a piece of driftwood, lost and aimless in the deep sea, having left the safe harbor of my mother's arms. But in the little boat of friendship, I found a brief moment of hope, a chance to breathe. There was no love, and I no longer needed love. With Clara and Oscar by my side, I pulled myself together enough to start arranging my mother's funeral. But a day later, Joel showed up at my doorstep with Lucas in tow. He was tall and striking, dressed in a sleek, expensive silver gray suit, his hair perfectly styled, making his already handsome features even more striking. In his hands was a bouquet of delicate pink orchids, softening his otherwise cold and distant aura. With a faint smile on his lips, as if nothing had happened, he said, "Helen, I'm here to take you home." He knew how much I cared about appearances, or I wouldn't have endured the self-inflicted torture of being with him for so long. Every time he pushed me to the edge, I'd want to lash out, but one look at his handsome face, and my anger would evaporate, dropping by at least 3 notches. But this time, I felt nothing. I looked at him calmly and said, "I've already drafted the divorce papers. They're in our bedroom drawer. If everything looks good to you, let's set a time to sign them." The smile vanished from Joel's lips. He stared at me, his gaze dark and intense. When he saw that I wasn't joking or being impulsive, he paused. Then, avoiding the topic of divorce, he looked down and pushed the well-dressed boy at his feet toward me. His voice was cold and detached. "Lucas, apologize to your mother." Lucas, dressed head to toe in branded athletic wear, stuffed his hands in his pockets, his face scowling in an attempt to look cool. Without looking at me, his eyes fixed on the stairs, he muttered with obvious reluctance, "Sorry." Joel smiled as he looked up, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Is that enough?" he asked. "So, this is how they saw me all along. So easy to fool?" These two, they really thought I was an idiot. My response was simple. I slammed the door in their faces. Chapter 6. Joel didn't seem to register what had just happened. It wasn't until a moment later that my phone suddenly rang. I answered, and his irritated voice came through, though he was clearly trying to control his temper. "Helen, do you really have to act like this? Acting like this? This was acting up? Then what about all the times Joel threw his countless tantrums with me? Should I call that being pathetic?" I let out a cold laugh and replied, "You don't have to come find me, Joel." Now, when I see the two of you, all I feel is disgust. Joel's breathing hitched sharply. I had never spoken to him like that before. Even when I was young and used to cry my heart out after he'd hurt me, I had never shown him this level of revulsion and exhaustion. To him, I was supposed to be the one person in the world who loved him the most, the one who cared for him more than anyone. How could I ever bring myself to say something so cruel? His labored breathing revealed a flash of panic, as if he was terrified I might say something even more hurtful. He quickly hung up the phone. I sat back on the couch, still holding the phone, and exhaled a long, deep breath. The truth is, Joel and I were never meant to be. We were from two completely different worlds. Joel came from a prestigious family. Both of his parents were giants in the business world. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Good-looking and adored by everyone, a true golden boy. The only real gap in his life was his parents' constant absence due to their demanding careers, leaving his grandmother to raise him. But his grandmother was old, and she spoiled him endlessly. When she couldn't keep up with him, she let him run wild, indulging his every whim and turning young Joel into an arrogant and uncontrollable brat. That was until Joel was kidnapped. The kidnappers were violent and cruel, not only demanding a huge ransom but also indulging in some truly disturbing habits. Although Joel was eventually rescued unharmed, his spirit was shattered, and his personality changed drastically. No one knew what he had gone through during that time. Even after his rescue, his parents remained busy with work, leaving his grandmother to watch over him, full of guilt, year after year. As for me, I had been in a terrible car accident. My family couldn't afford the medical bills, and the person who hit me was even poorer than we were. I was lying in that hospital bed, awaiting death, when Joel's grandmother saved me. At the time, she was already very old, sitting in a wheelchair, leaning on her cane. Her face was worn with age and exhaustion, but her eyes still gleamed with a sharp intelligence. She investigated my family background and spent a few days getting to know me. Then, she asked me if I would be willing to make a deal with her. She said that she had saved my life, and in return, she hoped I would save her grandson. Her grandson, Joel, was still young, handsome and highly intelligent, but dark and withdrawn, with thorns all over him, unable to integrate into the real world. She didn't want to watch helplessly as Joel wasted his life away or allowed him to spiral towards self-destruction. But she didn't have much time left. I didn't know how to repay such a life-saving debt. It didn't seem like I had much of a choice. I could only agree. That day was just 3 days before I was supposed to start college, a milestone I had worked so hard to achieve. I had already planned everything. I would work part-time while studying, graduate, find a good job, and help my mom divorce that scumbag. I would give her the good life she deserved. My future had seemed bright and within reach. But in reality, while my mother did successfully get her divorce, I never went to college. Instead, I was sent to Joel's home, where I dedicated myself entirely to reaching him, to warming him, healing him, letting him climb out of his darkness using my own bones and blood as his ladder. By the time he was finally willing to step out of his safety zone and embrace the light, my fate had long been bound to his. His grandmother passed away peacefully, without regret, but she never told me how much of this life-saving debt I had to repay. How much longer, after all these years of help and sacrifices, would I still owe? Chapter 7. Joel didn't know the truth about all of this. He was already completely dependent on me, even though I had been by his side for 3 years. He still feared that I would suddenly disappear and leave him. So, he wanted to tie me to him forever. As soon as I was of age, he couldn't wait to marry me. But even with the marriage certificate in hand, he still wasn't at ease. Every day, he would find new ways to ask me over and over, "Do you love me?" I would tirelessly answer, "I guess I do. Yes, I love you." After all, I had come into Joel's life at 17. Before that, I was so focused on my studies that I had never dated anyone. Besides, Joel was very handsome. Sometimes, when he lowered his long lashes and stared at me without blinking, my heart would genuinely skip a beat. His condition improved significantly after I became pregnant with Lucas. Around that same time, Joel discovered, much to his fury, that his parents had hidden the fact that they had another son, a brother who was nearly 10 years old. He was livid and began fighting for power within the family company. Joel was incredibly smart, and during those years of isolating himself, he had read extensively and studied hard. Combined with his striking appearance, he quickly made a name for himself in the business world. He no longer feared the outside world and slowly became captivated by the allure of wealth and luxury. Gradually, he started to neglect me, but he still clung to his habit of provoking my emotions, enjoying watching me react to his behavior, relishing in my jealousy. From these intense emotions, he derived the love he so desperately needed. It's been 10 years now. The woman in the mirror has fine lines beginning to form at the corners of her eyes, her gaze hollow and tired, as if all life has been drained from her. Meanwhile, Joel looks like a phoenix rising from the ashes, more mature, more handsome, and even more dignified. It's as if time has barely touched his flawless, striking face. But I find myself struggling to remember. What was 17-year-old Helen like when she met 20-year-old Joel? What was 23-year-old Joel like when he was so full of love for me, so desperate to marry me, that he couldn't sleep without holding me every night? I can't quite recall, but I do remember that we never had our wedding. Joel once promised me a grand wedding, one that would captivate the entire city, but I told him it was too extravagant and unnecessary. So, he said, fine. He would buy me a castle, fill it with flowers, and under a sea of blossoms, it would be just the two of us. He would confess his love to me first, then ask me countless times, "Do you love me?" And all I would need to say is, yes. There would be no need for witnesses. He would remember that moment forever, and for eternity. He would love me. 10 years have passed, and those painful yet happy years of youth are now behind me. My mother's death was a wake-up call, a sharp reminder that finally pulled me out of the fog I'd been living in. I gave Joel a child, a life for a life. The debt I owed has long been repaid. From now on, I am no longer Mrs. Joel, no longer Lucas's mother. I am simply myself. I am Helen. I am the Helen who is picking up that college acceptance letter I dropped at 17, ready to embark on the journey I should have taken long ago. Chapter 8. We kept my mother's funeral small and quiet. After all, she had spent so many years dedicated to the family, becoming estranged from relatives and losing touch with friends. There wasn't really anyone who would have made the effort to come to her funeral. So, I saved that money and chose a beautiful plot for her burial. I originally bought just one plot, but then I ended up buying 2 more, because Clara said that when I'm buried there, she wants to be buried right beside me too. Best friends in life, and best ghost friends in death. She said, no matter what, we'd still have each other to chat with. Reincarnation wouldn't be so lonely. Oscar, fully agreeing, raised his little hand and said he wanted a plot too. Clara flicked his forehead and told him to wait until he was older to choose for himself. You're too young, she said. If you buy one now and don't like it later, you'll just make a fuss. What had started as a somber matter was now lighthearted and cheerful, thanks to them, and the heaviness in my heart began to lift. Oscar, however, was left feeling disappointed about not having his own burial plot. On the way back, he held my hand and said, Mommy, then buy me an ice cream, and I won't be sad anymore. Clara scolded him, saying he wasn't sad at all, reminding him that he had just eaten a cone earlier and that I wasn't allowed to buy him another. Oscar, ever the actor, gave me a pitiful look, eyes wide and pleading. My heart melted instantly, ignoring Clara's fierce glare. I was just about to say I'd buy him one when a sharp, angry shout rang out from behind us. She's my mom! You can't call her that! Lucas came charging at us from nowhere, violently shoving Oscar to the ground. Oscar's palms hit the dirt, and his small, soft hands immediately scraped against the ground, drawing blood. His lips trembled, and he began to cry. Mommy, it hurts. My heart shattered. I picked him up, comforting him, while glaring icily at Lucas, who stood with clenched fists, red-eyed and glaring right back at me. Lucas flinched under my gaze, his pupils shrinking. His expression was stubborn, his tone accusatory as he reminded me, word by word, "I'm your son." I frowned deeply and told him, "I don't have a son as mean as you." Lucas froze. Tears welled up in his eyes, falling in large drops, but he tried hard to suppress his emotions. Wiping his face roughly with his sleeve, he lifted his chin defiantly, his voice fierce as he warned, "If you don't come back home, Dad's going to bring another woman into the house." Of course, I knew that. Lately, I'd been bombarded with taunting text messages and countless pictures of Joel with various women, all dripping with innuendo. I had blocked and deleted them, but they just kept coming. In the end, I had to change my phone number. Joel hadn't learned a thing. He still thought the same old tactic would always work on me, but I no longer cared about him. Why would I care what he did with others? My expression remained calm as I gently patted Oscar's back, soothing him. Towards Lucas, however, I was cold and indifferent. "Well, that's perfect. You can just go ahead and get yourself a new mom." Lucas looked at me in disbelief. It seemed like it had only just dawned on him that my attitude toward him had drastically changed, and that, perhaps, I no longer wanted him. After all, Lucas was still a child, and he couldn't help but cry. The more he cried, the louder it became. He clung to my leg, sitting on the ground and throwing a tantrum, hiccuping through his sobs. You have to come back with me. You're not allowed to be someone else's mom." Oscar had already stopped crying. He held onto my neck, wide-eyed as he looked down at Lucas wailing and throwing a fit on the ground. Then, scrunching up his little eyebrows in distaste, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I don't want this brother. He cries so ugly." Lucas heard him and momentarily stopped his sobbing. I took the opportunity to pull my leg free and coldly glanced at the bodyguards watching from the side of the road. Then I said, "That's right. He's not your brother. You don't have to bother with him." The bodyguards hesitated before stepping forward to help their young master. Lucas stared at me, his eyes vacant, as if my words had truly broken his heart. But I simply held Oscar in my arms, turned around with Clara, and walked away. I didn't give him another glance. Chapter 9. Getting a divorce certificate from Joel wasn't going to be easy, especially once he belatedly realized that my mother had passed away. The parade of women who had been bombarding me with messages suddenly disappeared, and there were no more annoying disturbances. Joel showed up at my doorstep again, but this time, he wasn't wearing a suit or styled to perfection. His hair hung loosely, his face was pale, and he looked somewhat disheveled, clearly not in a good state. It seemed he had finally understood. When I said I wanted a divorce, I meant it. Some things indeed needed to be discussed, so I let both of them inside. Lucas, unexpectedly, was quiet this time. He stood by Joel's side, clutching his father's pants, but his eyes were fixed on me, full of cautious longing. But no matter how he looked at me, I didn't return his gaze. I acted as if he wasn't there. Joel sat across from me, his expression showing guilt, his voice hoarse as he said, "I'm sorry, Helen. I didn't know your mom's illness was that serious. Why didn't you tell me sooner? If I had known earlier, I could have hired the best medical team in the country to treat her. No matter the cost, I would have made sure she got better." I felt calm inside and told him, "It was late-stage cancer. There was no cure. Telling you wouldn't have made a difference. Besides, she was my mother, not yours. It's normal that you didn't care. I was with her the day she passed, and she had no regrets. It was peaceful." Joel's pupils trembled, and his face turned even paler. He forced a weak smile, his dry lips twitching. "We're husband and wife. She was my mother too." The words were so absurd, as if he had shown my mother any respect or care while she was alive. I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Joel closed his eyes, embarrassed. After a moment, he tried to steer the conversation away, saying, "Let me take care of the funeral arrangements." No need. I cut him off, not wanting to watch him pretend any longer. I pulled out a document from beneath the table, already prepared, and pushed it toward him. Before I could speak, Joel shot to his feet, his voice cracking as he exclaimed, "Helen!" His eyes were red, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly, he grabbed my hand, dropping to one knee in front of me. His tone was almost pleading. "No, I won't agree to this. I refuse. Helen, I will never agree to a divorce." I slowly pulled my hand out of his grasp. Before Joel could spiral into madness, I gestured to the contract on the table. "Look at it closely first." Joel froze for a moment, then picked up the document from the table, realizing it wasn't a divorce agreement. He breathed a sigh of relief. But soon, as Joel continued reading, his brow furrowed deeply. The hand holding the paper tightened, and his breathing became increasingly rapid as he angrily flipped through the pages. By the time he reached the last page, where my youthful signature was scrawled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was practically grinding his teeth. "A deal? So, all these years, you stayed by my side, loving me. It was all just to repay my grandmother's favor? A transaction?" What Joel held in his hands was the contract his grandmother and I had signed all those years ago. The contract explicitly outlined everything I had done for Joel over the years. It wasn't out of love, it was simply to fulfill each clearly priced obligation in the contract. Joel stared at those black and white words for a long time, his expression completely blank, and that's when I delivered the final, crushing blow with a smile. "Joel, why don't you ask me now if I love you?" Chapter 10. Joel stormed out, slamming the door behind him. All that remained was Lucas, quietly sobbing, clutching the hem of his shirt and refusing to leave. He couldn't quite grasp the argument between his parents. What contract? What deal? But he did understand one thing. Mom was leaving Dad. She was leaving them. He slowly walked over to me, his tear-streaked face finally free from the usual defiant, bratty attitude. His eyes were filled with fear and uncertainty as he tentatively reached for my fingers. His voice choked with sobs. "Mom. I'm sorry." It had been so long since I'd heard him call me Mom. But now, as I looked at Lucas and heard him say that word, all I could think of was that rainy evening, the one where he had locked me and my mother outside. I couldn't find any softness left in my heart for him. In fact, looking at him now, all I felt was a simmering, trembling anger. I had carried him for 9 months, given birth to him, and we were supposed to be connected, mother and son, but his heart was tied only to Joel. He looked down on my mother, looked down on my background. He thought that only his father was someone truly important, even though Joel was hardly ever around. When Joel did occasionally remember to attend one of his school events, Lucas would be overjoyed, proudly showing off his father to all his classmates. I never got that kind of treatment. I shook his hand off and sneered. "Mom, I'm just your nanny, right? Other nannies you can get rid of when you're upset. But not me. That's why you hated me and kept trying to push me away, isn't it? Well, now I'm giving you what you wanted." Lucas shook his head furiously, trying to hug me while pretending not to understand. "No, you're my mom." I pushed him away, grabbing him by the shoulders and making him stand straight. "Lucas, you're not 3 anymore. You always say you're a man, so it's time you take responsibility for what you've done." I called the bodyguard who had always taken care of Lucas and sent him out of the house. Before closing the door, I remembered what Lucas had said to me through the intercom that rainy day. When I stood outside drenched to the bone, I gave a small, bitter smile and whispered, "Your mother doesn't want you anymore, Lucas." I slammed the door shut. Lucas threw himself at the door, banging on it, his wails echoing through the hallway. But no one came to comfort him. A few days later, Joel asked to meet. He had agreed to the divorce. I stared at that text for a long time, then prepared some things in advance and arrived on time for the meeting. Joel wore a custom black suit, his expression cold and distant, once again exuding that unapproachable air of superiority. On the table lay the divorce agreement I had drafted. All I asked for was $50 million in cash. I didn't want the car, the house, or custody of the child. For Joel's wealth, this was practically walking away with nothing. But I wasn't planning on returning the company shares and jewelry he had gifted me when we were deeply in love. After all, I had spent 10 years with him, helped him heal, and even gave him a child. I wasn't about to leave empty-handed. Joel watched coldly as I signed my name on the paper. When I pushed the agreement toward him, he remained still, his hands clasped on his lap, showing no intention of moving. A smirk tugged at Joel's lips as he stared at me, practically spitting the words through gritted teeth. You lied to me. Do you think you can just walk away so easily? I looked at him for a moment, calmly asking, do you want revenge? Joel let out a mocking laugh, leaning forward, his tone icy and full of disdain. Do you think you're worthy? His gaze scanned over my face, and he growled through clenched teeth. You want to run, to leave me, but I won't let you. I'll make sure you stay by my side forever. You won't be going anywhere. We stared at each other in silence, locked in a tense standoff. After a long moment, I sighed and pulled a stack of medical records from my bag. I'm pregnant. Joel. Joel froze, the icy mask on his face shattering instantly. Chapter 11. Joel snatched the medical reports from my hand. His long fingers trembled slightly as they gently traced the blurry, unrecognizable shape on the ultrasound. How strange, he liked children. But once they were born, he didn't seem to care much for them. Lucas had grown up with more attention from the bodyguard than from his own father. Are all men like this? It didn't matter anymore. I said calmly, sign it, Joel. I'll have the baby after we're divorced. Joel looked up at me, his brow furrowed, his lips parting as if to say something. I locked eyes with him and added, you saw how difficult it was when I gave birth to Lucas. Don't make this harder on me, okay? Joel didn't say anything after that. He remained silent for a long time before finally picking up the pen and signing the divorce papers. I had everything prepared, and while he was still processing it all, I pushed him to finalize the divorce that very afternoon. Once the papers were in my hands, I felt a wave of relief. I was finally free. As we left the civil affairs office, Joel suggested taking me home, but I declined. He frowned and said, you're pregnant now. How can you manage alone? There's a nanny at home to take care of you. I'll rehire the nutritionist. Anne. I raised the divorce certificate and waved it in front of him. Joel glanced warily at my belly and fell silent, but he couldn't resist asking, so, when will you come back? I knew what he was thinking. Because I was pregnant, he thought he had to give in to whatever I wanted for now. Once the baby was born and everything settled, he assumed he'd have plenty of time to get remarried and set things right. He still didn't believe we'd truly be separated. But that was okay. I'd give him time to face reality. My taxi arrived at the curb. As I got into the car, I saw Joel hesitate, torn between wanting to stop me and being unsure of how to act. It was almost laughable. He always showered me with care when I was pregnant, tried to win me back when I was disappointed, and only gave me something in return after I had already sacrificed so much. It was as if showing me kindness had to come with conditions. For the sake of my future peace, I warned him, keep Lucas away from me. I don't want to see him again. And you, too. With that, I told the driver to go, leaving Joel standing there with a dark expression on his face. Clara and I had already booked our tickets. When I told her the good news of my divorce, she was so happy she immediately opened a bottle of red wine to celebrate with me. The next day, we began our nationwide tour. We took Oscar along with us to see the vast herds of cattle and sheep on the Hulunber grasslands, the golden sunrise over Tibet's snow-capped mountains, the first snowfall at the Forbidden City, and the misty rain season in Jiangnan. We had the time of our lives. Oscar, with his strong constitution like his mother, never once spoiled the fun. In fact, he was the star of the trip, always full of energy and enthusiasm, truly a little angel sent from above. In the wide open winds of freedom, I felt like I was coming back to life, following my best friend from years past. With her little boy in tow, we traveled to all the places that I had once dreamed of visiting during my youth. It felt as if the soul that had been trapped on that hospital bed at 17 had finally, after 10 years, awakened at this very moment. Of course, the journey wasn't entirely smooth. My phone was practically blown up with calls from Joel. I wasn't pregnant. It was just a lie to fool him. Chapter 12. When Joel first heard the news, he was absolutely furious. He nearly flew over to confront me, but with just one sentence, "We're already divorced." "Joel, can't you let me go?" He stopped in his tracks. Joel and Lucas were alike in many ways, both cared deeply about appearances and their pride. If Joel were to chase after me now, clinging on, and behaving irrationally, it would be beneath him. So Joel stopped contacting me, just like in the countless Cold Wars we had experienced before. But this time, I didn't stay at home, struggling with sadness, consumed by thoughts of him, only to eventually call him, lower my head, and beg for reconciliation. This time, I was happy. The trivial burdens of family life no longer tied me down. I opened my arms, embracing nature, and embracing the new world that was mine, and the world embraced me back with warmth. There was nothing left that could make me sad anymore. A year later, when it was time for Oscar to start elementary school, Clara and I concluded our joyful journey. The day I returned home, I saw an expensive luxury car parked downstairs. Joel was leaning against the car, his long neck tilted back, staring up at the windows of my apartment. He stood tall and imposing, entirely out of place in the humble surroundings, drawing curious glances and whispers from the neighbors. I went about my evening routine, eating dinner, showering, and changing into my pajamas. As night fell and I prepared for bed, I looked outside. He was still there, like a lone pine tree, standing under the dim streetlights. With a sigh, I reluctantly went downstairs to meet him. As soon as Joel saw me, he stood up straight, his eyes greedily scanning every inch of me. At last, he seemed to realize that in the year I'd been gone, I had been doing just fine. There was a hint of sadness in his gaze. But quickly, he forced a smile and said, "Helen, come back home." This past year, Lucas has been acting out, not focusing on school, crying and asking for his mom. Seeing that I wasn't moved, Joel's voice grew quieter. The soft evening breeze rustled the leaves, the old streetlights casting a faint glow beside him. At last, he dropped the pretense of using our son as an excuse and whispered, "It's me. I've missed you. I'm sorry." I laughed suddenly and asked him, "You've done a lot of things you should be sorry for. Which one are you apologizing for?" A glimmer of hope lit up in Joel's eyes. He took a step forward and quickly said, "I've never cheated, Helen, neither physically nor emotionally. You know my issues. I just wanted to see if you still cared about me. I'm sorry about your mom, and I'm sorry for ignoring you and making you sad before." He rambled on, saying how there wasn't a single day this past year that he hadn't thought about me. He said he had seriously reflected on everything, but these were things I no longer needed. I told him, "You see, you've managed just fine without me for this whole year. Joel, you don't really need me. You're just used to my presence. You just don't want to let go." Joel's eyes suddenly turned red, and he shook his head, insisting it wasn't true. But then I asked him, "Why aren't you asking me that question anymore?" Chapter 13. Joel's lips trembled slightly, and his expression showed fear. He pressed his lips together, refusing to speak, so I sighed and answered for him. "Of course I loved you. What do you think kept me with you for so long? If it had only been out of gratitude. Then after I gave birth to Lucas and after you started working at the company, I could have left." Joel forced a smile that looked more painful than crying, tears falling as he tried to move forward and hug me. But I held out my hand, stopping him, and took a step back. I calmly said, "But all of that is in the past. Joel, I've let you go completely, and it's time for you to move on." Joel couldn't let go. He grabbed me tightly, his arms squeezing me so hard it felt like my bones would break. His tears wouldn't stop, and he kept muttering words of refusal. He couldn't accept that I no longer loved him. He began to beg me, frantically digging through his memories, trying to find traces of our happy past. But I still resolutely pried his hands off me, pushed him away, and turned to go upstairs. That night, Joel cried so loudly outside that the entire neighborhood couldn't sleep. In the end, someone called the police, reporting him for disturbing the peace. The officers came and took him away. The next day, Joel drove back to the neighborhood, his eyes horribly swollen, and fell asleep inside his car. On the third day, I passed an online interview with a large company. I quickly packed my things and left while Joel wasn't paying attention. Later, Joel came to my new office a few times to find me, but I either avoided him or bluntly told him harsh truths. After being together for so many years, he knew how to hurt me, and I knew exactly what words would stab at his heart. Eventually, he stopped coming. Then I got a phone call from Clara. She complained in utter disdain, telling me that Joel, or sometimes Lucas, would randomly show up at my old house to stay there. In my rush to get divorced, I had forgotten to change the locks. I was silent for a long time. Finally, I said, "It's fine, don't worry about it." When they were ready to let go, they'd naturally stop coming, and until they left my house for good, I wouldn't be going back. My life had started anew. This time, I'd take big strides forward and never look back.